Welcome to Finance Mandarin China Political Landscape CEO Workshop. At this China Insights Workshop, Vian Li, the CEO of Finance Mandarin, will guide you through the China political system, focusing on the finance regulators and analyzing the government working report on major economic-related policies. China will soon convene its annual parliamentary meetings, which will set up plans for policies involving the economy, trade, diplomacy, the environment, and more. The two sessions, which are the annual meetings of the National People's Congress and the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, begin this year on March 4th in Beijing. It will offer China's top officials the chance to lay out major economic policies affecting global markets and serve as a rare occasion to answer key domestic and international concerns. Authorities have already raised the threefold pressure of contraction of demand, supply shocks, and weaker expectations. External headwinds are also growing with the U.S. Federal Reserve's potentially aggressive monetary tightening, continued technological containment efforts by the United States, and commodity price hikes caused by geopolitical tensions. The ongoing crisis in Ukraine has added a further complication as more confrontations between major powers that have already haunted the global economic recovery and commodities markets loom. So, what can we expect from China's top leaders in two sessions? First, GDP and regulation. China's growth target, a baton for the economic policies for the rest of the year, will be reviewed at the end of the NPC session on March 5, when Premier Li Keqiang delivers the government work report. Beijing is expected to maintain growth of above 5% this year, with stability already prioritized by policymakers. Some advisors have argued that it would be appropriate to set a target of around 5.5%, while some have suggested a target range of between 5 and 5.5%. China set an economic growth target of above 6% for 2021, with its gross domestic product eventually growing by 8.1% last year. Economic stabilization endeavors for this year have already been evidenced by stronger monetary, fiscal, and credit support from the start of this year. These include a cut to two major policy rates, a record 3.98 trillion yuan of new lending in January, and the first batch of 1.46 trillion yuan worth of special purpose bond quota being issued. China's fiscal deficit ratio and special purpose bond quota will be key parameters to test the scale of Beijing's stimulus plans for the year ahead. Beijing must also balance the competing goals of carbon emission reduction and economic growth. The NPC is likely to reiterate its softer stance on deleveraging, enabling more funding to flow to infrastructure and housing, as well as a more flexible implementation of energy intensity caps, Societe Generale said last week. Another important question is whether or not policymakers will also signal a gentler stance on tech regulation. Second, zero COVID policy. China's zero-COVID policy has entered its third year, but concerns are continually being raised over its impact on the economy, particularly manufacturing and the lives of residents. It differs vastly from other major economies, which have tended to adopt a live-with-the-virus approach, and it has severely affected international exchanges. The parliamentary session will be an important window to see if Beijing will make any changes to its approach. Authorities can, though, also maintain the strategy because national economic growth remains relatively strong, and it is seeking stability ahead of the 20th National Congress. The Key Party meeting, which is held once every 5 years, is expected to undertake a leadership reshuffle when it takes place in the second half of the year. Third, unemployment. Unemployment has become a worrying issue after the coronavirus dealt a heavy blow to private and small businesses, which employ more than 80% of China's urban workforce. The official surveyed unemployment rate has been stable after the initial shocks in the early 2020. The reading fell from 6% in April 2020 to 5.1% compared to the government's target of 5.5%. But college students, migrant workers, and former soldiers are three major groups that are the main areas of concern. A record 10.76 million college students will graduate this year, and the surveyed unemployment rate for people aged between 16 and 24 was 14.3% in December. Meanwhile, the quality of jobs is deteriorating as the government advocates flexible jobs, including delivery workers and bloggers, which have already attracted 200 million workers. Fourth, population, aging, and births. China's population increased by less than 500,000 last year, but the number of births dropped for the fifth consecutive year. Chinese mothers gave birth to 10.62 million babies last year, an 11.5% drop from 12 million in 2020, while the national birth rate fell to a record low of 7.52 births for every 1,000 people in 2021, from 8.52 in 2020. Beijing upgraded its birth restrictions to allow couples to have up to 3 children from last year, while other supportive measures such as subsidies are also being considered. Economists have warned about a fast diminishing of China's demographic dividend, which helped form its economic miracle in the past 4 decades, and it poses a threat to the country's long-term productivity and potential growth. China's population is also aging, with people aged 60 and over accounting for 18.9% of the total population at 267.36 million last year. Additional supportive policies and more details about the postponement of China's mandatory retirement age could also be announced. Number 5. Protection of women's rights. The sight of a middle-aged woman chained by her neck and shivering in the cold weather in the eastern province of Jiangsu stirred a storm of anger and public appeal to tackle the decades-old issue of trafficking. 17 officials in China have already been sacked, punished, or are under investigation over the case, while her husband has been arrested and charged with abuse. He is also being investigated on suspicion of purchasing an abducted woman. Some members of the CPPCC had already planned to table suggestions to amend laws to enhance the protection of women's rights. As a signal of support from the central government, the protection of rural women's rights was included in a key document on this year's agricultural and rural works for the first time when it was released on Tuesday. Number 6. Foreign relations. As China's relations with the US-led Western world continue to sour, foreign relations have gained attention in recent years' gatherings, which are mainly supposed to handle domestic economic and social issues. China is still facing high tariffs and continued technological containment from the US. It may also receive further scrutiny after Washington accused Beijing of missing some of the targets in the Phase 1 trade deal. Lithuania and the unfolding Ukraine crisis have posed a new test to Beijing, as its moves are closely being watched and they may undermine its economic ties with the European Union and other developed economies. Chinese officials are likely to renew market opening and import promises, while they are also determined to push forward with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and seek to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Finance Mandarin covers 33 industries, such as banking, finance, insurance, energy, real estate, e-commerce, medical, consumer, TMT, and many more. Bring this China political landscape workshop to your company and business schools.